The encrypted radio crackled to life at 3:47 hours, cutting through the desert silence like a blade through silk. Team Bravo 6 was pinned down in the Coast Province, their voices tight with controlled panic as Taliban fighters closed in from three sides. The compound they'd been surveilling had turned into a death trap, and their extraction window was shrinking by the minute. "Control, this is Bravo 6 Actual." Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison's voice cut through the static, his breathing labored. "We need immediate close air support. Grid 427895352. Danger close, I say again, danger close. We have approximately 40 hostiles converging on our position." The Joint Operations Center fell silent. Captain Rodriguez, the night watch commander, felt his stomach drop as he scanned the tactical display. The nearest F-18 Hornets were 47 minutes out from Bagram. The Apache gunships were grounded for maintenance. For the first time in his 15-year career, he had no assets to deploy. "Bravo 6, be advised, nearest air support is 47 minutes. Can you hold position?" Morrison's reply came through gritted teeth. "Negative, Control. We've got RPGs incoming and they're moving to surround us. We need fire support now or we're going to need body bags." That's when the impossible happened. A voice calm as morning mist drifted across the emergency frequency. No call sign, no identification, just four words that would haunt everyone who heard them. "Bravo 6, this is Ghost." The radio fell silent. Rodriguez frantically checked his screens but showed no aircraft in the vicinity. Nothing on radar, nothing on the flight manifest. The voice had been female, which was unusual enough for combat operations in this theater, but there was something else, a quality of absolute certainty that made his skin crawl. "Ghost, identify yourself and state your position," Rodriguez demanded, his training taking over even as his mind raced through possibilities. "Control, Ghost is in position for immediate strike. Bravo 6, mark your targets." Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "Ghost, we don't see any aircraft. What's your platform?" Above the compound, at 38,000 feet, something moved through the star-filled darkness that wasn't supposed to exist. Its engines whispered secrets to the wind, its angular surfaces drinking in radar waves like a black hole devours light. In the cockpit, Major Cassandra Ghost, Thorne's fingers danced across controls that officially didn't exist, her green eyes reflecting the ethereal glow of displays showing a tactical picture no one else could see. She had been watching, waiting, listening to radio chatter from a mission that had gone sideways, just like her last assignment 8 months ago in Syria, just like the one before that in Yemen. The pattern was always the same: good operators getting killed because the cavalry arrived too late. Not tonight. Her jet banked silently through the thin air, systems coming online with predatory grace. The compound below looked like an anthill someone had kicked, muzzle flashes winking like angry fireflies as Morrison's team fought for their lives. She could see their heat signatures clustered behind a crumbling wall, could count the Taliban fighters advancing through her thermal imaging with crystalline clarity. "Ghost, we still don't have you on radar." Rodriguez's voice carried a note of growing alarm. "Identify your aircraft and authorization for weapons release." Cassandra's thumb hovered over the radio transmit button. She could imagine the chaos in the operations center right now, officers scrambling to identify the mystery aircraft that had somehow penetrated one of the most monitored airspaces on Earth. They would be checking with higher headquarters, running through classified databases, trying to solve a puzzle that had no official answer. Because officially, she didn't exist. The F-35 Ghost she flew wasn't on any manifest. Her mission wasn't in any logbook. As far as the military bureaucracy was concerned, Major Cassandra Thorne had been medically retired 8 months ago after a training accident that left her with nerve damage in her right hand and a psychological evaluation that questioned her fitness for duty. But some missions couldn't wait for bureaucrats to approve them. Some wars were fought in the shadows by people who had already sacrificed everything. Bravo 6, this is Ghost. Keep your heads down. Danger close in 30 seconds. Below, Morrison pressed himself against the mud brick wall as bullets sparked off the stones above his head. His night vision goggles showed a hellscape of advancing insurgents, their AK-47s chattering in the darkness. 3 of his men were wounded, ammunition was running low, and their radio operator was unconscious with a head wound that painted his face masked dark with blood. "Ghost, wherever you are, we're running out of time," Morrison whispered into his radio. "They're about to overrun us." That's when he heard it, a sound like silk tearing, so faint it might have been the wind. His trained ear caught something else beneath it, the almost inaudible whistle of ordnance cutting through air with surgical precision. The first explosion lit up the night like the birth of a star. A Taliban machine gun nest simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a fireball that left nothing but smoking crater. The second strike followed 3 heartbeats later, taking out a group of fighters who had been maneuvering around the compound's eastern wall. Morrison had seen enough airstrikes to know precision when he witnessed it. These weren't the massive, earth-shaking explosions of traditional close air support. These were scalpel cuts delivered with inhuman accuracy, each warhead finding its target with the kind of precision that spoke of advanced targeting systems, and a pilot who understood urban warfare at a level that bordered on the supernatural. Bravo 6 Ghost, how copy? Solid copy, Ghost. Outstanding work. Morrison's voice carried genuine admiration mixed with bewilderment. Where the hell did you come from? In the operations center, Captain Rodriguez was frantically coordinating with higher headquarters, while his communications specialist ran diagnostic checks on every piece of equipment in the room. The strikes were showing up on their seismic monitors, but the aircraft delivering them remained completely invisible to their radar systems. "Sir," Sergeant Hayes looked up from his console with wide eyes, "I'm picking up some kind of engine signature, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The acoustic profile doesn't match any aircraft in our database." Rodriguez grabbed his secure phone and dialed the Pentagon's night desk. This was rapidly escalating beyond his pay grade. Somewhere out there, an unidentified aircraft was conducting combat operations in a hot zone, and nobody seemed to know who was pulling the trigger. The third strike eliminated a mortar team that had been setting up to shell Morrison's position. The fourth took out what appeared to be a command post, based on the secondary explosions that followed the initial impact. Each hit was delivered with clockwork precision, methodically dismantling the Taliban attack with the kind of tactical awareness that spoke of someone who understood ground combat from a pilot's perspective. "Ghost, this is Control." Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of command authority. "I need immediate identification and weapons release authorization. We have protocols." "Control, Ghost is operating under special authorization. Stand by for authentication code." The pause that followed stretched like eternity. In that silence, Cassandra's fingers found the small silver locket hanging beneath her flight suit, feeling the worn surface that held a photograph she couldn't bear to look at anymore. Captain Elena Vasquez had been her wingman, her best friend, and the closest thing to a sister she'd ever known. Elena had died 8 months ago in Syria because their support request had been delayed by bureaucratic red tape. 47 minutes of bureaucracy, while good people bled out in the sand. Never again. The authentication code she transmitted was real, buried deep in classified systems that most people didn't know existed. It identified her as part of a program that officially didn't exist, flying aircraft that weren't supposed to be operational, conducting missions that would never appear in any official record. The Ghost program had been created in the black budget shadows for exactly this kind of situation. When American forces needed help and conventional channels were too slow, too restricted, or too bureaucratic to respond, Ghost operators filled the gap. They were pilots who had already lost everything, who had nothing left to lose except their sense of duty. Rodriguez's secure terminal chimed with an incoming classified message. As he read the authentication codes and operational parameters, his face went pale. The clearance level was so high that he needed to call his commanding officer just to verify that he was authorized to read it. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Webb arrived at the operations center still wearing her PT uniform, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She read the same message that had left Rodriguez speechless, then picked up the radio herself. "Ghost, this is Mountain 6 Actual. You are cleared for continued operations. We have additional friendlies in the area who may require support." Mountain 6 Ghost copies. I have eyes on multiple friendly call signs in sector. Will maintain overwatch. Webb set down the radio and turned to Rodriguez with eyes that held a mixture of respect and unease. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. That pilot has been officially dead for 8 months. As far as the Pentagon is concerned, she died in a training accident in Nevada. Her memorial service was attended by the Secretary of Defense." "Ma'am." "Ghost program, Captain. Black special access. When conventional forces can't respond fast enough, Ghost operators fill the gap. They're volunteers who have already sacrificed their official existence for the mission." Webb's voice carried a weight that spoke of classified briefings and moral compromises. That pilot chose to die officially so she could live unofficially, protecting people like Bravo 6 when the system fails them. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine as he processed the implications. Somewhere above the Hindu Kush, a woman who had erased her own existence was flying an aircraft that didn't exist, conducting missions that would never be acknowledged, saving lives that would never know her name. In the compound below, Morrison was coordinating his team's movement as the Taliban attack faltered under Ghost's precise intervention. The enemy fighters were retreating, their assault broken by strikes that seemed to anticipate their every move. It was like being protected by some kind of guardian angel who could see through walls and predict the future. "Ghost, Bravo 6, we're ready to move to Extraction Point Alpha. Can you provide overwatch?" "Bravo 6, Ghost has eyes on your route. You're clear to move. Be advised, I'm tracking additional hostile movement approximately 2 clicks south of your position. Recommend expedited movement to extraction." As Morrison's team began their tactical withdrawal, Cassandra watched through her advanced sensors, her aircraft circling the compound like a protective spirit. Each member of Bravo 6 showed up as a distinct heat signature on her displays, their life signs monitored by systems that could detect elevated heart rates and stress indicators. She had memorized their names from intelligence briefings she wasn't supposed to have access to. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, 34, from Kansas City, Missouri. 2 tour in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, married with twin daughters who were learning to ride bicycles. Petty Officer Marcus Williams, 28, from Detroit, Michigan, whose mother had died of cancer while he was deployed and who carried her rosary in his tactical vest. They weren't just heat signatures on a thermal display. They were husbands, fathers, sons, brothers. They were the reason she had chosen to disappear from official existence, trading her name and her life for the ability to protect people who deserved to come home. The extraction helicopter appeared on her sensors 15 minutes later, its distinctive rotor signature cutting through the night air like a mechanical heartbeat. A U-60 Black Hawk, call sign Dustoff 7, approaching from the northeast with an escort of 2 Apache gunships that showed up on radar like predatory hawks. "Dustoff 7, Ghost. You have 1 wounded friendly, priority. Landing zone is cold but recommend rapid turnaround. I'm tracking additional hostile movement converging on your position." "Ghost, Dustoff 7. Copy wounded friendly and hostile movement. What's your fuel state?" It was a professional question, pilot to pilot, but it carried undertones that spoke of combat veterans who understood the delicate calculus of risk and fuel consumption. Cassandra glanced at her fuel gauge and felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She had enough fuel to ensure the extraction was successful, but not enough to make it back to her unofficial base. Dustoff 7, Ghost is mission capable. Execute your pickup. Below, Morrison's team reached the extraction point as the Black Hawk flared into landing, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust that turned the night air into a swirling brown fog. The crew chief was already out of the helicopter, his red lens headlamp cutting through the darkness as he helped load the wounded SEAL onto a stretcher. Ghost Bravo 6, we're loading now. Thanks for keeping us alive out there. Bravo 6 Ghost, safe travels. As the helicopter lifted off with its precious cargo, Cassandra felt the familiar hollowness that came at the end of a mission. Another successful operation that would never be acknowledged. Another group of operators who would go home to their families, never knowing the name of the pilot who had saved their lives. Her fuel warning light flickered amber, then steady red. She had maybe 40 minutes of flight time left, nowhere near enough to reach any official base. But that had been true for every Ghost mission she'd flown. The program was designed for pilots who had already accepted that they might not come home. Control Ghost, mission complete. Bravo 6 is clear of the area with their wounded, no further air support required. Ghost Control, outstanding work. What's your recovery plan? It was a question Rodriguez had to ask, even though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Ghost operations existed in a gray area where normal rules didn't apply, where pilots made calculations that conventional military doctrine couldn't accommodate. Control, Ghost will handle recovery independently. Recommend you log this mission as a successful extraction with air support provided by conventional assets. The lie would protect everyone involved. The official record would show that Bravo 6 had been extracted successfully, with air support provided by assets that were already on the books. No one would ask awkward questions about mystery aircraft or authentication codes that led to classified programs. Lieutenant Colonel Webb picked up the radio herself. Ghost, Mountain 6 actual. Be advised, we have a recovery option if you need it. Mountain 6. Ghost appreciates the offer, but I'm mission capable for independent recovery. It was pilot speak for, I'll figure it out, which in the context of Ghost operations could mean anything from landing at an off-the-books airstrip to making a controlled crash in the middle of nowhere. Ghost pilots were expected to be resourceful in ways that conventional military training couldn't prepare them for. Cassandra banked her aircraft toward the mountains, following a route that would take her away from populated areas and monitored airspace. She had contingency plans, developed during months of unofficial planning and reconnaissance. Remote airstrips that didn't appear on official charts. Hidden fuel caches that had been established by people who understood the need for plausible deniability. The Ghost program operated on the principle that some missions were too important to be limited by conventional constraints. When American forces needed help and official channels were too slow or too restricted, Ghost operators filled the gap. They were pilots who had already sacrificed their official existence for the mission, trading their names and their lives for the ability to respond when seconds counted. As her aircraft disappeared into the mountain shadows, leaving only the whisper of engines that weren't supposed to exist, Cassandra thought about the photograph in her locket. Alina would have understood the choice she'd made. Alina would have made the same choice herself. In the operations center, the night watch slowly returned to normal routines. The official log would show a successful SEAL extraction with air support provided by assets returning from a routine patrol. No mention of mystery aircraft or authentication codes that led to programs that didn't officially exist. Captain Rodriguez filed his report with careful attention to what could be documented and what needed to be forgotten. He had been in the military long enough to understand that some operations existed in spaces between official acknowledgement and plausible deniability. Sergeant Hayes was running diagnostics on the radar system, trying to understand how an aircraft had operated in their airspace without appearing on any of their sensors. His preliminary report would conclude that atmospheric conditions had caused intermittent radar returns, a technical explanation that satisfied the need for documentation without raising uncomfortable questions. The truth would be filed away in classified databases that most people didn't know existed, accessible only to individuals with security clearances so high that they required presidential authorization. The Ghost program would continue to operate in the shadows, protecting American forces when conventional military doctrine wasn't fast enough or flexible enough to respond. But for the men of Bravo 6, settling into their seats aboard the evacuation helicopter as the Black Hawk carried them toward medical treatment and eventual reunification with their families, the mission would be remembered differently. They would remember the voice that had materialized from nowhere when they needed help most desperately. They would remember precision strikes that had turned the tide of battle with surgical accuracy. They would remember Ghost. Lieutenant Commander Morrison adjusted his headset as the helicopter flew through the darkness toward Bagram Airfield, his wounded teammate stable and receiving treatment from the crew's medic. In his 17 years of military service, he had experienced situations that challenged everything he thought he knew about military capabilities and operational security. "Sir," Petty Officer Williams leaned closer to be heard over the rotor noise. "What do you think that was? That Ghost pilot?" Morrison considered his answer carefully. In the special operations community, there were always rumors about black programs and capabilities that existed outside normal military doctrine. Pilots who flew aircraft that weren't on any official roster. Missions that were conducted with equipment that wasn't supposed to exist. "Williams, sometimes there are guardian angels watching over us that we don't need to understand. Sometimes the best thing we can do is be grateful and not ask too many questions." It was the kind of answer that acknowledged classified realities without violating security protocols. In the world of special operations, there were things that happened that couldn't be explained through conventional military doctrine, capabilities that existed in the spaces between official acknowledgement and operational necessity. As the helicopter disappeared into the darkness, carrying its cargo of saved lives toward safety, Cassandra's aircraft continued its journey into the mountains. Her fuel gauges showed red across the board, but she had been flying on fumes before. Ghost pilots learned to operate at the margins of possibility, finding ways to complete missions that conventional military planning would consider impossible. The hidden airstrip appeared on her navigation display as a barely perceptible gap in the terrain, an abandoned Soviet-era runway that hadn't appeared on official charts for 30 years. Her landing lights illuminated cracked concrete and weeds growing through asphalt as she touched down with the whisper-quiet precision that had made Ghost aircraft legendary among those who knew they existed. As her engine spun down to silence, Cassandra felt the familiar mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction that came at the end of a successful mission. Another group of American operators would be going home to their families. Another crisis had been resolved without official acknowledgement or bureaucratic delay. She had traded her name, her official existence, and her future for the ability to respond when conventional military doctrine was too slow or too restricted to save lives. It was a bargain she would make again, knowing that somewhere in the darkness American forces might need help that only Ghost operators could provide. The photograph in her locket caught the faint glow of her instrument panel as she began the post-flight procedures that would prepare her aircraft for its next mission. Captain Elena Vasquez smiled back at her from the small silver frame, frozen in a moment of happiness that had been captured 3 days before her death in Syria. "Another one for you, Elena," Cassandra whispered to the empty cockpit. "Another group of good people who get to go home." In the silence that followed, she could almost hear her wingman's voice responding with the call sign they had shared. Copy that, Ghost. Mission complete. The night air was cold and thin at 8,000 feet above sea level, carrying the scent of snow from peaks that towered into the star-filled darkness above the hidden airstrip. Cassandra completed her shutdown procedures with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through dozens of unofficial missions. Each switch and control moved in sequence according to protocols that existed only in the memories of pilots who had chosen to disappear from official records. Her ground crew consisted of two people who had made similar choices: former Air Force maintenance specialists who had been declared dead in training accidents, who now existed only to keep Ghost aircraft operational for missions that couldn't wait for conventional military approval. They emerged from camouflaged bunkers as her engines wound down, their movements efficient and professional as they began the process of refueling and rearming her aircraft for its next mission. How'd it go, Major? Chief Master Sergeant Tony Restrepo had been maintaining military aircraft for 26 years before officially dying in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. His expertise with advanced avionics systems had made him invaluable to the Ghost program, though his family believed he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Clean mission, Chief. Bravo 6 is extracted safely. No friendly casualties beyond their original wounded. Cassandra climbed down from her cockpit, her flight suit still damp with sweat despite the cold mountain air. We'll need full ordnance reload. I expect we'll be tasked again within 72 hours. The Ghost program operated on the principle that American forces in combat zones faced threats that couldn't wait for conventional military responses. When SEAL teams were pinned down, when Marine units were being overrun, when Army Special Forces needed immediate air support, Ghost operators provided capabilities that existed outside normal command structures and bureaucratic constraints. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had been the Air Force's youngest avionics specialist before her official death in a training accident that had never actually occurred. She ran her diagnostic equipment over Cassandra's aircraft with the kind of attention to detail that kept pilots alive in situations where mechanical failure wasn't survivable. All systems nominal, Major. Your stealth package performed flawlessly. The opposition never knew you were there until their positions started disappearing. Santos's voice carried the professional satisfaction of a technician whose work had contributed to a successful mission. Fuel consumption was actually below projected parameters. The new engine configuration is performing better than expected. The Ghost aircraft represented technological capabilities that were years ahead of anything in the conventional military inventory. Stealth characteristics that made them invisible to enemy radar. Engine designs that reduced acoustic signatures to whisper-quiet levels. Weapons systems that could deliver precision strikes with surgical accuracy. But technology was only as effective as the people who operated it. Ghost pilots were veterans who had already proven themselves in conventional military service, who had been selected for psychological profiles that indicated they could operate independently in situations where normal command structures and support systems weren't available. Chief, what's the intelligence picture looking like? Cassandra asked as she walked toward the underground command center that served as the nerve center for Ghost operations in the region. Multiple developing situations, Major. We're tracking increased Taliban activity in the Helmand province, and there are indications that Al-Qaeda is moving high-value targets through the tribal areas along the Pakistani border. Restrepo's briefing carried the kind of detail that spoke of intelligence networks that operated outside conventional military channels. Conventional assets are stretched thin, and several special operations units are conducting missions in areas where normal air support coverage is limited. The Ghost program filled gaps in American military capabilities that couldn't be addressed through conventional force structure or operational doctrine. When special operations units were conducting missions in denied areas, when Marine units were operating beyond the range of normal air support, when Army forces needed capabilities that didn't officially exist, Ghost operators provided solutions that existed in the shadows between official military doctrine and operational necessity. The underground command center had been carved out of solid rock, its walls lined with electronic equipment that monitored military communications across the region. Multiple screens showed tactical displays that tracked American units in real time, identifying situations where ghost intervention might be necessary. Major David Kim had been an Air Force intelligence officer before his official death in a car accident that had never actually occurred. His expertise in analyzing threat patterns and predicting enemy behavior had made him invaluable to ghost operations, though his parents still visited his grave in California every Memorial Day. Major Thorne were tracking a developing situation in Kandahar province. Marine Recon Unit is conducting surveillance on a high-value target compound, but they've been compromised. Conventional air support is 43 minutes out, but intelligence indicates the target is preparing to move within the next 20 minutes. It was the kind of situation that the Ghost program had been created to address. Time-sensitive operations where conventional military responses were too slow or too restricted to be effective. American forces who needed immediate support in situations where normal command structures and bureaucratic procedures would result in mission failure or friendly casualties. Cassandra studied the tactical display, her pilot's mind automatically calculating distances, fuel requirements, and weapons loadouts. The Marine unit was operating in an area where enemy air defenses were known to be active, where conventional aircraft would face significant risks from surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery. But Ghost aircraft had been designed to operate in exactly those kinds of environments. Stealth characteristics that made them invisible to enemy radar systems. Electronic warfare capabilities that could neutralize surface-to-air missile systems. Weapons that could eliminate threats with precision that minimized collateral damage and civilian casualties. Kim, what's the threat assessment for the target area? Multiple SA-7 and SA-14 surface-to-air missile systems, plus conventional anti-aircraft artillery. Enemy communications intelligence indicates they're expecting coalition air support and have positioned their air defense assets accordingly. Kim's analysis carried the kind of detail that spoke of intelligence networks that penetrated deep into enemy operational planning. Conventional aircraft would face significant risks, but Ghost stealth characteristics should allow you to operate with minimal detection probability. The mathematics of Ghost operations were brutal in their simplicity. Conventional military aircraft operated with significant support structures, tanker aircraft for refueling, electronic warfare aircraft for protection, search and rescue assets for pilot recovery if something went wrong. Ghost operators worked alone, with no official backup and no rescue options if their missions went badly. But they also had technological advantages that made them nearly invisible to enemy detection systems, weapons that could eliminate threats with surgical precision, and the kind of operational flexibility that conventional military doctrine couldn't match. Chief, how quickly can we have the aircraft ready for launch? 15 minutes, Major. Ordnance load will be optimized for precision strikes against hardened targets, with electronic warfare capabilities configured for the known threat environment. Restrepo's response carried the confidence of a maintenance specialist who had prepared aircraft for dozens of similar missions. As her ground crew began the process of preparing her aircraft for its next mission, Cassandra reviewed intelligence reports that painted a picture of American forces operating in increasingly complex and dangerous environments. The war in Afghanistan had evolved from conventional military operations to a shadowy conflict where enemy forces used civilian populations as cover, where the rules of engagement required split-second decisions about legitimate military targets versus innocent civilians. Ghost operations existed in the gray areas where conventional military doctrine struggled to provide effective solutions. When Marine units needed immediate air support in urban environments where conventional weapons would cause unacceptable civilian casualties, Ghost operators provided precision capabilities that could eliminate specific threats without damaging surrounding structures or harming innocent people. The mission briefing that appeared on her tactical display showed the kind of complexity that had become routine for Ghost operations. The Marine Recon Unit was observing a compound where intelligence indicated a high-value al-Qaeda target was meeting with Taliban leadership. The building was located in a densely populated area where conventional airstrikes would result in significant civilian casualties. But intelligence also indicated that the target was preparing to move within the next 20 minutes, probably to a location where surveillance and interdiction would be much more difficult. The Marines needed immediate support to prevent the target from escaping, but conventional military assets were too far away to respond in time. Ghost capabilities offered a solution that existed outside normal military constraints: stealth aircraft that could operate undetected in heavily defended airspace, precision weapons that could eliminate specific targets without causing collateral damage, pilots who had the experience and authorization to make split-second decisions in situations where normal command structures were too slow to be effective. Major, aircraft is ready for launch. Santos's voice carried over the underground command center's communication system. All systems checked and verified, ordnance configured for precision strikes against hardened targets in urban environments. Cassandra reviewed the mission parameters one final time, her pilot's mind running through contingency plans and emergency procedures that might be necessary if the mission encountered unexpected complications. Ghost operations required pilots who could adapt to changing situations without external support, who could make tactical decisions based on real-time intelligence and their own combat experience. The walk back to her aircraft took her through the camouflaged hangar, where other Ghost assets were maintained in constant readiness for missions that might be tasked with as little as 15 minutes' notice. Each aircraft represented technological capabilities that were years ahead of anything in the conventional military inventory, operated by pilots who had sacrificed their official existence for the ability to respond when American forces needed help that couldn't wait for bureaucratic approval. Her flight suit still carried the scent of high-altitude air and jet fuel from her previous mission, familiar odors that had become as much a part of her identity as the silver locket that held Elena's photograph. Each mission carried the possibility that she might not return, but also the certainty that American forces would receive support that could make the difference between mission success and tragedy. "Ready when you are, Major." Chief Restrepo's voice carried the professional confidence of a maintenance specialist whose work had contributed to dozens of successful Ghost missions. "Weather is clear, threat environment is as briefed, and the Marines are requesting immediate support." As Cassandra climbed into her cockpit for the second time in less than 4 hours, she felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and focus that came before every Ghost mission. Somewhere in Kandahar province, Marine Recon operators were depending on support that only Ghost capabilities could provide. Conventional military assets were too far away, too slow, or too restricted to respond effectively. The engine startup sequence proceeded with whisper-quiet efficiency, advanced turbofan engines spooling up to operational parameters without the roar and vibration that characterized conventional military aircraft. Ghost aircraft had been designed for operations where acoustic signatures could compromise missions or endanger friendly forces. "Ghost Control, you are cleared for immediate takeoff. Mission is authorized under special operational parameters. Rules of engagement are weapons-free for identified hostile targets in the designated target area." "Control, Ghost copies all, departing immediately for target area." The takeoff roll was completed in less than 800 feet, advanced engine technology and aerodynamic design allowing the aircraft to achieve flying speed with minimal ground distance. Within 90 seconds of brake release, Cassandra was climbing through 15,000 feet, her aircraft invisible to enemy radar systems and nearly silent to ground-based acoustic detection. The flight to Kandahar province would take 37 minutes at maximum cruise speed, which would put her over the target area just as the Marine surveillance window was closing. It was the kind of timing that required split-second coordination between intelligence analysis, mission planning, and operational execution. As her aircraft climbed toward its operational altitude, Cassandra reviewed the target intelligence one more time. The compound was a traditional Afghan structure, mud brick walls surrounding a central courtyard, with multiple buildings that could provide concealment for high-value targets. Intelligence indicated that the meeting was taking place in the main building, but also warned that the compound was being used to shelter civilian families who were unaware of the military significance of their temporary hosts. Ghost weapon systems included precision-guided munitions that could eliminate specific rooms within a building without causing structural damage to adjacent areas. The kind of surgical strikes that required not just advanced technology, but pilots who understood urban warfare at a level that conventional military training couldn't provide. Ghost, this is Control. Be advised, Marine unit reports target is showing signs of preparation for departure. Recommend expedited arrival. Control, Ghost is 32 minutes from target area at current speed. Can increase to maximum velocity if mission requirements dictate. The decision carried implications that went beyond simple tactical considerations. Maximum speed would reduce her flight time by 7 minutes, but would also increase fuel consumption and reduce the time she could spend over the target area if the situation required extended observation or multiple strikes. Ghost operations required pilots who could make those kinds of calculations in real time, balancing mission requirements against aircraft capabilities and fuel limitations. There were no tanker aircraft available for refueling, no alternate landing sites if something went wrong, no rescue assets if she was forced to eject over hostile territory. Ghost Control, increased to maximum speed. Mission priority is immediate target interdiction. The afterburners engaged with a sensation like being kicked by an invisible giant, advanced engine technology providing thrust levels that pushed her aircraft to speeds that made the landscape below blur into abstract patterns of brown and green. At 45,000 feet, the air was thin enough that her contrails would dissipate almost immediately, leaving no visible evidence of her passage. Below, the landscape of Afghanistan unfolded like a tactical map made real, mountain ranges and river valleys that had been contested by armies for thousands of years. Soviet forces had learned the difficulty of conducting military operations in terrain that favored defenders who knew every ridge and valley. American forces had been learning the same lessons for nearly 2 decades. But Ghost operations offered capabilities that previous military forces hadn't possessed. Stealth technology that made aircraft invisible to enemy detection systems. Precision weapons that could eliminate specific targets without causing collateral damage. Intelligence systems that could identify legitimate military targets in real time. Ghost Control. Marine unit reports target compound is showing increased activity. Multiple vehicles are arriving. Intelligence indicates preparation for high-value target movement. Control, Ghost is 26 minutes from target area. Request confirmation of rules of engagement for mobile targets. The question carried implications that spoke to the complexity of modern warfare. If the high-value targets departed the compound in civilian vehicles, traveling through populated areas where conventional airstrikes would cause unacceptable civilian casualties, Ghost capabilities might be the only way to prevent their escape to safe havens where interdiction would be much more difficult. Ghost Control. Rules of engagement authorize engagement of identified hostile targets regardless of mobility status. Mission priority is target elimination. Collateral damage must be minimized. It was the kind of authorization that required pilots with experience in urban warfare and the tactical judgment to distinguish between legitimate military targets and innocent civilians. Ghost operators were selected for psychological profiles that indicated they could make those kinds of decisions under pressure, without external guidance or bureaucratic approval. The target area appeared on her navigation display as a cluster of buildings surrounded by agricultural fields, typical of rural Afghan settlements that provided cover for insurgent operations while maintaining the appearance of normal civilian activity. Her advanced sensors began painting a detailed picture of the compound layout, identifying structures, vehicles, and personnel with crystalline clarity. Control, Ghost has eyes on target area, confirming multiple buildings within a walled compound, 6 vehicles in the courtyard, approximately 20 personnel visible on thermal imaging. Ghost, Marine Unit reports high-value target is confirmed present in the main building. Request immediate strike on designated target. Through her advanced sensors, Cassandra could see the Marines' observation post concealed in a ridge line 800 meters from the compound. Their thermal signatures showed the controlled alertness of professional operators conducting surveillance on a time-sensitive target, weapons ready, but positions chosen for concealment rather than immediate action. The compound below showed the kind of activity that intelligence had predicted. Vehicles arranged for rapid departure, personnel moving with purpose rather than the casual patterns of civilian activity, armed guards positioned at key points around the perimeter. But thermal imaging also revealed the presence of smaller heat signatures.